Hola, mi gente. Me llamo Liz Duran Boubion, the founding director of FLAC, the Festival of Latin American Contemporary Choreographers. We are based in Yelamu, the unceded territory of the Ohlone Ramaytush people in what is now known as San Francisco, California, though I'm currently zooming in from my Oakland Cocina home office. As Latino, Latina, Latine, and Indigenous dance artists of the Americas, FLAC is responding to what it means to be an artist during a time of genocide. After a year of resistance, our curatorial theme for our 11th annual festival is El Grito por Thaura, a cry for revolution. El Grito meaning the scream or cry in Espanol, for Thaura meaning revolution in Arabic, showcases artists in transnational solidarity representing social justice issues that center local immigrant, queer, feminist, and indigenous perspectives that extend to Palestine. Leading up to the festival this November, FLAC is hosting community care discussions and workshops by local BIPOC dance makers, scholars, and activists. Today, we are joined by multidisciplinary artists Stephanie García from Mexico and Riham Isaac from Palestine. Stephanie Garcia is a multi-awarded Mexican artist from Mexico City, currently based in the ancestral lands of the Utes, Goshute, Paiute, and Shoshone, known as Salt Lake City, Utah. She is an arts administrator, curator, and advocate. Stephanie is a co-founder and co-director of Punto de Inflexión dance company and Pro Artes Mexico. She has performed in 11 countries in America, Europe, and Africa, and created more than 30 original interdisciplinary pieces presented in the USA, Mexico, Cyprus, Ireland, Peru, Panama, Spain, and Cuba. I had the pleasure of seeing her work featured at the Odyssey Dance Festival in LA and was impressed by so many elements. Welcome, Stephanie Garcia. Welcome to the El Grito podcast.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you for providing this space.
Thank you for being here. Riham Isaac, a multidisciplinary artist from Palestine, weaving acting, singing, dancing, and video to explore new mediums of live performance. In 2017, she co-directed the Alternativity at Christmas Time in the Shadow of the Bethlehem Wall, alongside Oscar-winning co-director Danny Boyle and Bansky. Alternativity was a highly political yet playful show that was spotlighted in a BBC Two documentary. In 2023, her solo performance, Another Lover's Discourse, commissioned by the Belfast International Arts Festival, captivated UK audiences and earned a nomination as a Vault Festival Show of the Week. She is currently pursuing a PhD in performance practice at the University of Exeter, focusing on the intersection of performance, land liberation, resistance, and environmental and cultural activism. Riham is deeply invested in how performance practices can deepen our understanding of land injustices and bridge activism with the transformative power of art. Riham Isaac, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to El Grito.
Thank you so much, Liz, and it's nice to be with you as well.
And to our audience, welcome to Art as Resistance, from Palestine to Mexico. Multidisciplinary artists Riham Isaac and Stephanie Garcia engage in a conversation about how performance practice is part of resistance, resilience, and liberation in the face of colonization from the border walls of Palestine to Mexico. They discuss creative processes and survival strategies that preserve culture, knowledge, existence, and hope in the lowest, most revolting and crisis-ridden times. As the U.S. Campaign for Palestinian Rights reports, the land split by the U.S.-Mexico border wall is lined with towers patrolled by Israeli weapons manufacturer Elbit Systems, while Israeli companies Elta and Magal and occupation profiteer Caterpillar are vying for contracts to get their hands on the wall. So when people chant from Palestine to Mexico, all the walls have got to go, it's more than just a slogan. It's a shared reality of colonization and corporate exploitation that translates to a shared struggle for collective liberation. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Stephanie. Thank you so much for being here. Take it
Thank
away.
you. Yay. Well, before anything, I just want to thank you both. I am excited to, at least virtually, have this space to put together two people that I just met in the last year, and that there are topics that we are concerned about and inspire our work. Some of those are kind of not great, like sad issues that are happening around the world and that affect us directly or indirectly. And that's why I just found the mission of Liz and the Festival of Latin American Contemporary Choreographers and the practice of Riham very pertinent to coincide today. So I will pass it to Riham and we can keep talking. But I wonder if Riham, you can talk to us about who you are. Already we had this wonderful introduction, but who you are, how did you get into the arts, and specifically in this moment, and because of where you are from, how that shaped you as a person, as an artist, and yeah, we can take it from there.
Okay, thank you both for this amazing introduction, Liz and Stephanie, as well, to have thought to bring us together to talk about this. I think this is very important in these times, to be linked to artists around the world whose practices who's facing maybe different ways of colonization, or has faced it before, or are still facing some of that results of it. So I think it's just a great opportunity to link us together. I think I would also like to acknowledge, I don't know when the audience will be hearing this, but today is the 7th of October, and it has been a year already since the genocide in Gaza has started, and the whole war that started after that happening in the West Bank, in Lebanon, in Yemen, in everywhere in the region. At the moment is a really hard time for us, and it's really unpredictable. So yes, I wanted to acknowledge all our martyrs. More than 40,000 people has died already, and there are some people who are still under the rubble. So I think to start with where I am now is also very important, because I feel I have been doing art for more than 15 or 20 years. I've been like a theater actress, and then a performance artist, and then I've been really engaged in theater and performance for half of my life now, I would say. But now is a very particular moment for us. It's very hard, and it's very strange, and it's very I would say overwhelming in a way, is how to approach this in our work. So yeah, coming from my background, being a multidisciplinary artist and being engaged of what's happening in my community and in Palestine, I've done a lot of projects that is directly political, but is also sometimes not direct politics. Like my last solo was about love, which is called Another Lover's Discourse, which more tackles gender issues and how we find ourselves in relationships, and the stereotypical relationships that we find ourselves in, and between the the female and the male, and all of this, and how you navigate all of this from your tradition, from your culture. So in a way, I'm talking not about just the occupation and what's happening for the in the political and the political realm in Palestine. So as an artist, I'm really open to so many subjects and topics, and this is very important as well, to highlight that we are humans by the end of the day, and we need to talk about different subjects. But I think at the moment now, it's really hard not to be involved, and not to put ourselves and not to question, I would say, not to question our practices, and how we can be inside of this resistance or revolution in our work. This is why I found myself now in my practice thinking about land more and how we perform land in times of crisis and times of wars, and how we can intersect performance and make it closer to activism, and how can activism also influence our performances, so that it's not two separate things, that it's more colliding and working together to raise more awareness, but also to move people, not just to raise awareness, but also to make actions, concrete actions, hopefully. I'm still questioning that. This is a new, this is my new research, my new work. Yeah, I think that's why I'm here, dedicating my time to that, rather than feeling a little bit like helpless in these times.
I love what you said about, I mean, questioning, which is kind of substantial. I would think for like building critical thinking and kind of questioning everything in life and not give for granted things, but also what you say about like changing our minds, in the sense that art has been a path for you and for like through your work maybe to touch other people's I mean maybe feelings or reflections or ways of thinking about the place they are at or the situation they are at, and it is like also an impactful way, but also in some ways more generous way to transform maybe structures of mind. And I really love what you're saying about it. I would think that also if you can talk a little more about in which moments do you decide, for example, to approach a more political work. I mean, today it is kind of not thinking about it, as you mentioned, but in the past as well, like, or how is your process of like deciding this is what I need to talk, it is relevant, it is a time to talk about it, and how also, if you can talk a little, how are your creative processes as well? I'm curious to know.
That's a big question, and a very good one as well, because the creative process changes with the kind of work that you want to do and with the questions that you have at the moment. So I can give an example of a work that I have done in 2014, I would say, during Kalandia Biennale Festival, which took place in Ramallah. And maybe that will explain a little bit about my creative process. And this has been a direct, I think, I would say, like, every work is political, but it was like about the occupation and about my memories, about me living the first Intifada, the first revolution that happened in the Palestinian history. It's not the first revolution, but it was one of the community led revolution that stayed for 4 or 5 years. It started in 1987. I'm now 41 years old. At that time, in 1987, I was 6 years old. So I grew up as a child, and then it ended when I was 10 years old or 11 years old. So like a child until like I'm still a child, but like you grow your awareness during that time. And you've seen how the community were leading such a very well organized revolution, and having great leaders as well around you who are leading you towards freedom and liberation. So it was, in a sense, all of us were at that time thinking about liberation. So to make a piece about that time in 2014, the Biennale wanted to do something about archives and like we dedicated our projects to do about the first Intifada and to dig into that archive of what's happening, of what was happening. So immediately, it took me back to that time when I was a kid growing up in Beit Sahur, a small town near Bethlehem, which has led also a very important resistance at that time. People started boycotting everything, like not to pay taxes as well for the Israeli government. They started building their own, not like they started making their own milk, their own cheese, like planting things and distributing the food amongst the neighbors. So it was really such a like we were teaching, like I was going to schools inside of, from house to house to go to school, because at that time everything was closed. I mean, it was a big resistance and a big revolution all over. Sorry about my English. Sometimes and then yeah, I think at that time a symbolic moment was not to say a main symbolism of the revolution was stones and throwing stones as well. So it was the revolution of stones against such a military regime, I would say, and military soldiers. So you would really see a lot of images around that. But one thing that I remember is that I used to be living in an old house in Beit Sahur, so a lot like soldiers would come and think that it is abandoned a little bit. But sometimes they would come and knock on the door and get my father or whoever is there to take out the stones that were put in the roads as a roadblocks for the tanks not to enter. In this way, they can slow down their entrance to the town, so that these small kids who are like freedom fighters, who are like 16 or 15 years old, can run away. So I remember this action of like, these kids are putting these stones, big stones, on the road, and then them calling my father or like the neighbors around. Them talking about the Israelis because they would not want to push it away. They would come and ask them to put it on the side. So it's it was such a big action, to put it and come. No. And it suddenly just clicked in my head, and I wanted to put myself into into those shoes, and like to push a big stone in the streets of Ramallah now in 2014. Not now, but I mean 2014, which is like what happened to the revolution. How long can we keep this revolution? How long can we keep pushing this revolution? It's more like, is it like the curse of Sisyphus, or is it something that is going somewhere? Did we forget that those times where we were all organized and making this action together? So it was like a very simple action, but coming from my memory of such a tiring action, I would say, of the revolution at that time, when you see young people or even women, or everyone was involved in that revolution and doing these kind of actions. But at the same time, I dressed up as a woman who was her photo was also very symbolic at that time of the revolution. She's also was from Beit Sahur, who was dressing in black and wearing yellow shoes and yellow scarf. So you can see her throwing one stone in one hand and having a yellow shoes in the other hand. And for me, this is also a symbol of the figures who were part of that resistance at that time, because she was coming out from the Sunday church, and this is how they used to dress up. Like, they would go to Sunday church, and then they would go to the to go to a demonstration together and throw stones to the soldiers. So that's how I like to. So this also explains my creative process in a way. So it's like a research, but also like tapping into multi layers of of visuals and actions and things that digs into your memory, but also makes more questions around what you're doing. So I did that. I'm sorry, I'm taking a lot of time, but like last moment is like I did that in the street of Ramallah, and for 2-3 hours. It was a durational performance, which I can share in a bit. And yeah, it had a great intervention and from the people around me.
Yeah, if you wish, we can watch it. I loved it. I watched it, and I love the people that it is in the audio, and they are like, I don't know. We should like, before I spoil it, maybe we should watch it, and we can talk about the reactions. I consider that very interesting.
Yes, it was like, yeah, I think we can watch it. I think it's nice, and then I can talk about the conversation. I think it will be interesting.
تلعب حديد
ريهام تلعبي حديد؟ لا هذا عرض فني حاجة
أنا بشوف
تذكير للانتفاضة.
هيك تذكير. نحن كتاب بنعرف برضو بنعرف كيف.
لا ما هو هذا
المظاهر يعني
كسيمبل.
في هذه المظاهر في حال انه انتهى الاحتلال بنذكروا الناس في الاحتلال وكذا بذكروهم في الانتفاضه الاولى، ولكن الاحتلال ما زال موجود. بامكانهم انه يكون هذا العمل حقيقي.
ان شاء الله بيكون حقيقي.
يكون حقيقي على ارض الواقع. شو اللي بمنع يعني؟
ان شاء الله.
الاحتلال يعني نموذج بيكون مجسم لشيء زال، لكن الشيء كان ما زال موجود.
بس هي اليوم المظاهرة الفنية، بس المظاهرة الفنية
تجسيد الواقع يعني تجسيد الانتفاضة الأولى.
هي تذكير الناس بالانتفاضة.
نعم.
تذكير إنه كان في انتفاضة وكان في
أنا أبونا أنا نتنافس.
والحجر واحد سيمبول من رمز للانتفاضة.
هو رمز للانتفاضة، ولكن يعني في مظاهر كثيرة تقدر الواحد يعبر عنها برضه في نفس الوقت. يعني الاحتلال ما زال موجود، وإنه هذه المظاهر أصبحت مجرد ذكرى، يعني مجرد أمور رموز وكذا، بالرغم من إنه
Great, thank you, Liz.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the man that is speaking. Like certain things he mentions is like not the right way, right? But I guess like he explains, like he elaborates after saying these things of like, because kind of like for him was like it is right if the occupation has already ended, but it's still there. And like not only bringing memories of the past, like all these elements were so like impactful for me listening, like how he was perceiving your action. I don't know, it kind of impacted me as well. But I don't know, like how was the experience of being in the middle, you know, like all these young people, that it feels also playful, but I just feel that there's like an impact on them as well. I don't know.
Yeah. That's the thing, is like when you do such an action, you never understand, you never predict what would be the reaction. I didn't think that there will be this parkour group who are dancers just there. And then they started pushing with me or pushing against me and then jumping on the stone. And I think this is their kind of revolution already. Like they are in a way not limiting their dance, you know, they are an existing actual group. But coming back to the conversation, I think it was like, for me to find out this conversation was very treasure for me, because I didn't have a documentation for the work, but there was my mother who was speaking. And my mother has been recording me because she wants to record what's happening. And then this man comes, and they are both like, I think my mother is also like from a generation, and his generation, like they are both from the same generation. So both of them talking about the same time, that revolution in like different ways, because she said for her it's important to remember the symbol and to keep, you know, bringing it to bring this conversation to the streets. And for him, it was like more critical about, well, that's not from the past. It's still going on. And this is exactly what I wanted, this kind of debate. That was my question in the work, is like, where is this revolution? What have you done as he said, I'm a writer. What have you done so far with the revolution? What has these young men who were pushing with me doing with the revolution? What all of us are doing with the revolution? Where is it? Where is it? And are we still remembering them, or we want to revive it? And for how long? And for what is the vision with our revolution anymore? So yeah, I think it was a treasure for me, this conversation, because it's exactly what I wanted to provoke and in the streets. So yeah.
There's so much that I would like to mention from all what you've been sharing, but
Yeah.
I to do it. I'm going to keep my intervention very short. I don't know, Liz, if we can pull the first video, and I want to jump in several things you mentioned, because one of the things we wanted to talk, we can play the video while I am speaking, if possible. Thank you. We wanted to share about how multidisciplinary practice is a way of expressing, but also as a resistance, and eventually in our next kind of blog of sharing our work, how do we find hope? Because I feel that without hope, especially in a moment like this one we are living in, it becomes really hard to keep going in some ways. So what I want to unpack a little is, well, I want to share, like, I cannot imagine what it means to live in a place where there's conflict, and like a conflict like the one that the Palestinian and Israel, it's been holding for years and years. This didn't start in October 7th. And in general, one of the things that I find is that the narrative makes it look like it started then, but it didn't. But I do want to, like, one of the coincidences that I found, and I find in this conflict is like, some of my work, it has been always also about social injustices, inequalities, gender violence, and part of this work that we're looking here, actually this solo, it also talks about gender violence, and I find like it is kind of something that we, through cultures, patriarchy is not something that came only with colonialism. It like it is part of our cultures, even indigenous cultures, even before colonization. In the case of the Americas arrived. This piece talks about it. The photos at the beginning, it was a piece that I created about, I call it like the human horrors, and it did touch certain moments in history. One of those, actually, it talked about the genocide of Second World War as a phenomenon that I was not understanding, how we as human beings can commit genocide. And I, like, years after I created this piece, we are like 10 years after, and we are living and going through the current genocide with Palestinian people. And it is more troubling to me trying to understand how community that faced that situation in the past and was like their ancestors went through this phenomenon, how can we replicate these behaviors against other human beings? And it's been a way. You mentioned archive and memories. I love when we were seeing this video of you and the conversation of this man, that it is not in the past. It is important to remark that it is not in the past, and how, like, your practice also brings this archive that it was in your memory when you were a child. And actually 1987, that was the year I was born, which is very interesting to me. But like how that memory becomes in something sublime and beautiful through your work, your artwork, like through a performance on the streets, that it becomes this moment of joyfulness with the youth. Thank you, Liz. With the youth dancing around, and also taking this way of expression to deal and face the day a day with a conflict that goes beyond yourself, and maybe sometimes you feel frustrated because you don't have the tools to stop, even if we claim that it is inhuman and it is like violating any today, you know, like any international policy and human rights is still happening. And yet I can see this youth around you, you know, like smiling and dancing and like interacting with you and with the stone. um and it is a way to find hope and keep walking in times like this one, that sometimes it's very challenging to wake up in the morning and say like, okay, it's time to face life, right?
Yeah. It's very interesting what you have said, Stephanie, and I probably never thought about it in this angle. And I'm really happy that I'm hearing this from you and just making me, because yeah, it did provoke a lot of playfulness that day. Like I did not, like, you remember this was like, this is like a game that we used to also play when we were kids, you know, when you have a rope and you want to push and someone else pushes you. So it became, I thought it's going to be a very serious performance in the streets, like where me just pushing the stone and like, but then it became very playful where people were like, yeah, we will push with you. No, we will push against you. And I think this is part, it talks about the streets of the people who are in Palestine. This is our culture. This is our resistance. This is our resilience. I mean, for people who have lived more than 76 years of hard occupation and confiscation of land, killing, prisoning, every family has a story. And to keep fighting for our freedom and not letting go, I think is an act of hope at some point, where we're like, I think this is how we as communities you know, like give strength to each other. Is like, we will get through it. Like they will not, like they will not succeed. Like we will still be here. We are existing. This is our culture. We are proud of it. We will keep telling the stories. We will come back one day. The right of the return. Everyone is in, like, everyone believes in that, and nobody will take away that from us, I think. Like, of course, this is very horrible what's happening these days. The genocide is like, it went to the peak of our history now, and but still people are hoping for freedom and for liberation. Like, it is something that I find in the youth more and more, and even I find in myself, is like, the stronger it gets, the stronger I want to fight. And I become more like wearing my kufiya and going on the streets is like, hello, you know, we exist. You cannot erase us, even though all the, yeah, everyone's like, all the regime that's happening, Israel mentality is to really cleanse us, and it's been their strategy from the beginning. But yeah. So yeah, thanks for bringing this up. And I find your work is also fascinating. Yeah, gender as well, and the violence that you can get from that is still in the same system of patriarchy and the power dynamics.
Yeah, I feel that really colonialism is, you know, like you were mentioning, like multi-layered, and how like multi-layered how your work is, and also like this contrast of this man talking and your mom. I didn't know it was your mom, but like when I watched for the first time the video, like this woman talking and building this contrast, and this contrast of yourself also, like with this costume that it feels like, you know, like it is not high heels, but like certain kind of heels, like pushing this rock is like, oh my gosh, this contrast makes it very interesting and appealing to me. But also when you're saying like this resistance, and like they are not taking the joy, they are not taking the willingness of survival, and like making your culture and your history be there. And these days that I was thinking about our conversation, I thought a lot about the history of also the Americas, and how lands were, like people was exploited, and like all the wealth was taken away. And sometimes I think a lot about Latin American people, many of the ones that have immigrated to the United States, trying to find a better way to live. And there's this issue where all Latin Americans, they are perceived as the same, even when there's many different countries and many different traditions, that there are things that can be similar in some ways, but definitely not the same. But how we are all put in the same bag. But I do embrace the Latin American identity, in the sense that there is something that unify us, and unfortunately is the struggle that colonialism has been set in our history, and how it is very similar, how it affected not only when colonization happened, and how they administered not only the lands but also human lives. But there's also another side, that it is this joy that you're mentioning, where we try to find the positive side, or the joyful side, or the festivity aspect of the existence, because it's the way that we face the struggle, and it somehow, I feel that it makes us stronger. And I do feel that it is something we have in common also with the so-called global South, all the nations that we've been through, and we still are. Even like the extreme example for me is like right now Palestine, but in general, like in a more concealed and like less explicit way, like the countries of the global South, that we're still facing all those consequences of coloniality. And yeah, I don't know if this makes me think about like this other aspect of your work. It is not that you stop doing this kind of work that is more political and maybe more dense, but not more dense, like more, it could be considered serious, even when we just saw that people on the streets will possibly perceive it from different angles. But like how is it a need for you to approach to other topics like love? And yeah, like how do you approach this kind of work, if you can talk a little bit about it?
I think my work, I start from myself. So like whatever I feel, there's something that triggering me, or there's something that I really need to tap into. It's a way for us as artists to heal ourselves in a way. So I'm like, I found my my first inspiration would be like, now there is a deep trigger inside me that I want to follow and to dig into. So I usually don't think about what's my next project is, but it just appears to me. But in a way, it all intersects. So when I did my my project about love, it was about also like the gender dynamic, and like how you find yourself in that kind of patriarchy system, who's like putting you in such stereotype or an image of this woman who has to find her husband. And it's like, as growing in the Arabic culture, it's like marriage is really an important aspect of our lives and goals as young ladies and young men as well. So like the whole society dynamic towards how we approach love. So it is for me still political, but in a sense it was also very personal, and like reflecting on my journey, on how I learned about love from, like from my tradition, from the cinema that I was watching, like the Egyptian cinema, from the romantic songs. And I think everybody related to this work, because everybody has fallen in love, and everybody has been in pain with love, and everybody thought that love looked like this way from Hollywood cinema and from, the books that we read, and nobody talks about like love in a way that is, like, fragmented like for you, and like it could be this, it could be this, it could be that, and what's your choice? It suddenly becomes very abstract, and you don't know how to deal with it. And it's like, you have to, you know. So it's a concept that I wanted to unravel first, but I also wanted to reflect on my own personal story growing up as well, and where I grew up, and yeah, be very very vulnerable by the end, and just like it was such an autobiographical work, I would say. So I really included also interviews of my family, of my friends, and I put really myself out there. Yeah. So, and I think these kind of like personal stories that could be very international as well. So it's like it's another aspect of my work that I like sharing with audiences. Yeah.
There's something you mentioned that I am kind of interested, because I feel that many people go through this process of realizing what do we even mean about loving, you know, or having like an interaction with another person or appreciation for other person. And there's like all these stereotypes and structures of how, you know, like how love should look like. What does that mean culturally as well? You know, like we embrace these traditions. In our case in Mexico is coming from obviously colonization and all the influence of Catholicism, where there's like only one way to create a family, right? Like the male and the female, and like if you get married, you are married forever, and like all these kind of things. And I feel that in many cultures we go through this process of realizing that there's many more ways to, you know, love and interact. And in particular in Spanish, we have like two words. One is when you say to someone, I love you. In Spanish, it has like a very strong implication, and it's kind of almost like when you say that, is like a romantic thing, you know, or to your parents or your siblings. But then there's this other one that it is te quiero, that I don't know exactly a translation in English, but it's something more like I appreciate you or something. It has less, you know, like this weight. And yeah, when I started growing up and like all the influence of, you know, like it is not only like the economic domination of the stronger nations, but also like the cultural colonization that everywhere we are like almost exposed to. I was going to say victim of, but we have, you know, like you realize we have options. But yeah, you start kind of to undo all those structures and be more flexible. And I started to acknowledge like you can feel love for friends, you can feel love for, you know, like a culture, you can feel love for so many things that doesn't necessarily implicate another kind of romantic or erotic relationship. There's other ways to love, genderly speaking, or like sex preference, etc. Oh my gosh, I'm losing my train of thoughts, but I just was kind of like interested on, oh yeah, I remember now. So I also witnessed that your practice is, you know, like many artists, it's not only like your own performance work or performing work, you also teach workshops, you also so I think my question was like, in which other ways, you know, love is this kind of like it supports your practice, and in which other ways you transform it, and if you can share a little bit about it.
You mean the love for work, for also teaching?
Yeah,
or like yeah
I know all those aspects that you also, your practice also have.
Yeah, I think the main element for me in my work is like there's many dimensions, but like I think the main element is like I like to work in spaces. So even in my performances that you see, like you've seen like Stone on Road, like you would see always like, where am I working in a space? In Another Lover Discourse, my love project, I also like, I did some films in different spaces and I put it into my performance. So I really like always to question where my performance would be. Is it in a theater box? But if it's in a theater box, where should I put my audience in my in my work, because which space will I let them go to? So a lot of my work is around how we create in spaces as well. So I have developed a workshop that is about performance in public spaces, but also how we use also multi-mediums in working in spaces. So like it's a very open laboratory for working through disciplines and realizing a performance that you want in a particular space, or a space that calls you, because it's always a conversation with you in the space. Either the space challenges you, or either you challenge the space. So it's something that I'm inspired about, is working with spaces and places, I guess. So yeah, I developed this workshop, and it's a passion of mine, and this is what influences as well now my work about land, because land is also a space, but land has more meaning to it than a space, because a space or a place even means something different, like this is my place, or nobody says this is my space. Or public space, what is it, a public space? But land has its own notion, I would say. So it's a different aspect now of my work that I will be exploring. But yeah, I think that's a passion of mine. And I've seen you as well doing some work. I'm also like curious about the work that you do. I know that we want to share a video of that, but like we can still talk, and then yeah, I don't know.
Well, I am delighted to hear you. I know that it is very late there, so we could stay here for, like hours speaking, and maybe we can create another space to do it. But I am really thankful, especially for me, it is enlightening to try to understand how to stay positive and optimistic and hopeful in moments that are, they feel for moments very dark in our world. Like the conflict with Palestine and Israel is like an example, but like in general, we've been facing a concealed constant action of colonization in our world, in many communities, that even I have to acknowledge myself, being raised and living in Mexico City, I couldn't see the dimension of how other communities, like indigenous communities, rural communities, that are facing the level of violence. And I feel that we just need to not lose that awareness, and it is overwhelming, but yeah, I just think that art is a way to that awareness and empathy. So I just appreciate it. Thank you, Riham, to be here, and Liz for creating this space.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I loved where the conversation went. Just so dynamic. And the last conversation of love made me think, decolonizing love. This is how might we love if we were not under occupation, or if we're not struggling with the oppression of capitalism and late capitalism. And Stephanie, when you talk about the global South having similar struggles throughout the world, it's imperialism, it's US imperialism, disrupting and destabilizing so many countries just for its capitalist agenda, putting sanctions on countries, forcing people to leave, and just really appreciating, Riham, you're reserving the right to dream, your right to imagine and to dance and to play. And as really critical forms of resistance, we just desperately need it, especially when the pain is so unbearable.
Well, I also want to thank you both, Liz and Stephanie. Stephanie, I really enjoyed the conversation as well, and how it was, and unraveling itself very dynamically. And thank you, Liz, for holding this space for us, and for making us meet and speak about our practices like this in such a such a terrible time. And I know that in your heart you are with the Palestinian revolution. And I think creating the name of Thawra inside of your festival is very important and very symbolic. To have these kind of action of solidarity around the world means a lot to us. So yeah, you can find me also if you want to follow more about my work. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all of that. But I'm such on an Instagram more under my name, Riham Isaac. And yeah, you'll find all the work that I'm doing about love, or about the clown, or about places and public spaces as well.
Yeah, I have a website, stephaniegarcia.art, and also Steph Garmar being like Instagram or Facebook